Good evening. We'll be discussing on a chapter called Accounting for Not-for-Profit Organization or Non-Profit Organization. According to me, the easiest chapter in your entire, syllabus. But it is lengthy. That's the whole problem. Lengthy means you take a question on this, easily it will take 40 minutes to solve. So, time management becomes very important in this issue. I don't think after this session anybody would be confused or even an element of doubt would be there in this chapter for the simple reason that it's simple, absolutely simple. With that positive note, we will start off. When I tell accounting for not-for-profit organization, I mean those entities which are established with the motive not to earn profits. What are those entities? Like schools, colleges, though in real terms it could be quite different, but then we still feel that it is meant for certain public purpose. Clubs, recreational clubs, then we have this sports authorities, where it is meant for some purpose, not to make profit. When such is the case, there comes accounting issue, whether we should follow a profit and loss account and a balance sheet. The moment we say profit or loss, then we are talking about something called commercial terms. I don't think these organizations like clubs, then schools, colleges, then NGOs, they don't predominantly do an activity which is commercial in nature, but they do an activity which is in commercial nature, which is an ancillary part of it. For example, if I am taking an NGO or a temple or a trust or a mosque or a church, releasing the books about the temple, church, mosque, about the NGO and selling the books, that might be a commercial activity, but it is an auxiliary unit or an ancillary activity for the main purpose. Understanding? In case of a college, if college itself supplies books to the students at a cost, then it is an auxiliary activity. If a college, instead of supplying books, deals with, say, software products, then it becomes a commercial activity. Understanding? Huge hangama is happening for many universities, which is in the guise of, telling education that they are doing a lot of commercial activities. One thing we have to remember is there is a link of this chapter and income tax in terms of section 12 capital A. 12 capital A talks about registration of trusts, charitable organizations, all these things, wherein straight the income is exempt. There's nothing to be taxed. So that benefit is a huge benefit if you come under a trust or a charitable organization. Many people think if we get the registration of 12A, then we are saved, we need not pay a rupee of taxes. Well, that is true, no denial about it, but then each of your activity has to be having a nexus with the main purpose of your whatever core purpose is there of why the trust was opened or why the charitable organization was opened. Till you establish that, they may not allow you to escape. Recently, many universities are facing this problem, many educational institutions are facing this problem. Let's take a simple example of applications, prospectus. When they know they are going to allot only 200 seats per year, why have 5,000 applications sold? Simple question income tax department asked. You know your maximum allotting 200 seats. Then you should sell only 200 applications. Why do you sell 500 applications? Where the cost of the application is hardly 20-30 rupees and you are selling it at 250 rupees. It is nothing but a pure commercial activity. Understanding? Yes? Take another example of clubs. These are all real practices that are happening which may not be found in any textbooks. Through our practical experience, I am trying to share things. Take for example recreational clubs. In recreational clubs, what happens? You should become a member first by paying some fees, membership fees. After that, you are allowed to access the facilities of club. Fine, you enjoy it. But then, why are you charging the same member an additional fees for the guest? Guest fees in some clubs are 40 rupees, 50 rupees, it goes on up to 500 rupees. As a club member, don't you think so? It's fair it's fair for a club member to take his friend or a guest to the club. You understand the point? Yes, he goes with his family. Family is covered under the membership, no problem. They are not called guests. My close friend, who is a member in so and so, he called me and went for a business talk. Why should he pay, or why should the member pay additional fees towards it? That is not in association or not in line with the club activities. The club activities says the members should enjoy the benefits of club. True. When the benefits of club is enjoyed by another person for which you are charging, then it should become a commercial activity, for which you have to pay tax. Understanding? So a lot of litigations are there. You name it, there is a lot of things. In NGOs also this is happening. In the guise of telling that it is a public event, say for example anti-AIDS awareness program, what are you doing? You are doing some activity of advertising your NGO, fine, fair enough. People should know about you. People should come forward to take help from you. The intention is treat AIDS patients or educate people about all these activities, what is supposedly going to create the disease, fine. But you are taking a co-sponsorer from someone in your banner, sponsored, event sponsored by so and so, so and so, so and so people, for which you are charging. Yes? Then you should create your own public funds. Public funds should happen by virtue of donations. This is not donations. Mind you, for example, if an NGO goes to Infosys and tells, can you sponsor the program? Infosys overwhelmingly tells yes, because it's a corporate social responsibility. They will sponsor. The money what is got is directly related to the particular event, no doubt about it. But Infosys did not give donation to the NGO. It sponsored with two intentions in mind. One is corporate social responsibility. Second one is brand image. When they had a commercial intent to sponsor you, you also are deemed to have a commercial intent by taking the money. If they had taken it as donation, Infosys word wouldn't have come in that banner. Do you agree with me? If Lloyds Academy sponsors something, I always want my name coming over there. That is why I am sponsoring. For nuts, I will not sponsor. I should prove to the Ministry of Company Affairs while filing my ROC documents that I am involved in corporate social responsibility and therefore I have funded so much to so and so NGOs. That is what the status of Infosys thinks. They want this. But then they did not donate it. Had they donated it, their name wouldn't have come. So a lot of tax issues are there in this. Barring all those things, keeping it aside, the realities aside, our textbook says income of a club, expenditure of a club. Income of an educational institution, expenditure of an educational institution. Right? We start the chapter on this note, stating that any of these not-for-profit organization bodies, they will get money, they will spend money. True? That whatever they get is a receipt, whatever they spend is a payment. In terms of real receipt and real payment, you will find it coming under receipts and payments account. I have clearly noted all cash checks received, paid. So I cannot include receivable or payable in receipts and payments account. That is the first point to be registered in your mind. Getting it? Only receipt, only payment will come in receipts and payments account. And second point to be registered in mind, there is no distinction between whether it is a revenue receipt or a capital receipt. In sense, I have received by sale of books, which is my charitable organization, that also will come under receipts and payments account or receipt side of the receipts and payments. If I have sold an asset and out of that I have got some money, that also will come under receipts. If I have purchased a new asset, that will come under a payment. If I have paid salary, it will come on the payment side. Salary payable, outstanding asset balance payable will not come. Expected receivables will not come in receipts and payments account. Pure receipt, pure payment only will come, notwithstanding the fact whether it is a revenue item or a capital item. Clear about it? So, how do I closely associate receipts and payments? It is nothing but my cash book. Cash entries in cash book, bank entries in passbook. If I summarize that, then I will make a receipts and payments account first. Whole Kundali is there in cash book and receipts and payments account as to how much of money you have received, how much of money has gone. Clear? So therefore, it starts with opening cash and bank balance. Receipts will increase the cash and bank balance. Payments will reduce the cash and bank balance. Therefore, the closing balance of receipts and payments account will have closing cash and bank balance. How could exam questions come? They'll give you opening balance, they'll give you receipts, they'll give you payments, they'll give you payables, they'll give you receivables, ask you to find out the closing cash and bank balance, question mark, or ulta. Closing cash balance is given, receipts, receivables, paid, payables, opening balance, question mark could be there. How do we extract information out of it? Opening balance is question mark, leave it. Out of the receipts and receivables, identify only receipts, whether it is revenue or capital. Out of the paid payables, identify only payments, which is either revenue or capital, doesn't matter. Closing cash and bank balance is anyways given. Balancing figure has to be the opening balance. Understood the catch here? Simple? Any doubt? Okay. Now, once a receipts and payments account is done, then we move on to income and expenditure account. In income and expenditure account, you treat it like profit and loss account. Incomes will come on one side, payments, expenditure will come on another side. This is purely revenue in nature for a particular duration in nature. That year's subscriptions received will come on the income side. That year's subscriptions receivable will also come on the income side. Because it is not receipt and payment, it is income. Income means what is actually received, what is receivable, what is prepaid, in sense advanced. Advance incomes received. Next year's income received now itself. All this plus minus we have to do. We have done that in first PUC. What is that? Salary equals to salary amount less opening outstanding, add closing outstanding, less next year's payment. Same concept for income, same concept for expenditure. In simple terms, opening outstanding should be minused, closing outstanding should be added, next year's should be minused. Are we in for this? If you know this small technique of identifying outstandings, then income and expenditure is not a big issue at all. The resulting balance of income and expenditure, what you will get is, either you will get an income over expenditure, that is excess of income over expenditure, or excess of expenditure over income. If excess of income over expenditure, then it should add to the capital fund in the balance sheet. It is like profit and loss account getting added to capital. In our partnership accounts, sole proprietorship accounts, what we do? Capital, add profit for the year or less losses for the year. Instead of telling profits or losses, we are telling excess of income over expenditure or excess of expenditure over income. Are we clear on this? Sure? Good. So, all revenue items of receipts, receivables, paid, payables is recorded in income and expenditure account. It may end with excess of income over expenditure or vice versa, or it could balance also. Income is equals to expenditure. It could balance also, very rarity. You will either get excess of income over expenditure or expenditure over income. If you get excess of expenditure over income, straight away balance sheet impact is in capital fund, excess of income over expenditure will be added to the capital fund, excess of expenditure over income will be reduced from the capital fund. Are we clear on this? Sure? Next, generally what happens, exam based approach this is, generally income and expenditure is prepared based on receipts and payments account, which means in your question they'll give you receipts and payments account, you are asked to prepare income and expenditure account with certain adjustments. How does it happen? You will get receipts, payments as receipts and payments, few adjustments. In the receipts and payments, receipt side, identify income nature, receipt, take and put it on the income side. In the adjustments, if there is any outstanding adjustments, you do the adjustments. Payment side, only revenue in nature payments you take. Check whether there are adjustments related to the further outstandings or prepaids part of it. Put that in income and expenditure account. Your income and expenditure account is closed. Right? However, as an abundant caution, generally income and expenditure is prepared based on receipts and payments account and additional adjustments given. However, exam questions may be asked to arrive at receipts and payments account from income and expenditure adjustments. Income and expenditure and adjustments. Which means an income and expenditure account will be given, adjustments will be given, you have to backwards go and arrive at receipts and payments. This is also quite possible. And the third important type of question that can come is, I repeat, first is income and expenditure has to be derived from receipts and payments account and adjustment. Second case is ulta. Income and expenditure account and adjustments will be given. They'll ask you to prepare receipts and payments. Third type of question, which is a lengthy 16-mark question, if you get it, jackpot. 12 marks question, pakka from this chapter. Pakka. I'll write and give you in a bond paper. If you get a 16 marks question, ideally it will be like this. They'll give you some 20 odd transactions. From that transaction, you have to prepare first receipts and payments. Then from the 20 odd transactions, you have to prepare income and expenditure, then balance sheet. If it is a 12 mark, receipts and payments plus adjustment would be given, income and expenditure and balance sheet has to be arrived, or vice versa. Income and expenditure and adjustments would be given, you have to prepare receipts and payments and balance sheet. A 16 mark question, transactions would be given or trial balance would be given, you have to prepare receipts and payments, income and expenditure, balance sheet. We will work all varieties of sums. Right? Next. Receipts and payments and income and expenditure can also be prepared based on each activity and then consolidated. For example, an NGO is doing activities in, say, Mumbai as well as Bangalore. There can be income and expenditure, receipts and payments, balance sheet of Mumbai activity, Bangalore activity, independently receipts and payments, independently income and expenditure account, independently balance sheet. Then both can be merged also as a consolidated receipts and payments, balance sheet, which is a rarity. I have not seen such questions coming, but definitely worth discussing. Nothing needs to be done for that. Simple. First prepare Mumbai branch or Mumbai's activities, then prepare Bangalore's activities in consolidated item of so and so organizations, consolidated receipts and payments, line by line addition. There in Mumbai, what is the subscription? Here in Bangalore, what is the subscription? That plus this equals to Excel working. That's all. Microsoft Excel working. You have to be fast. That's all is the matter in this. If you are fast, you will walk through this. This chapter is a savior to each and every student. Of course, it saved me a lot. My accounting marks, I used to bank on such chapters. This one, amalgamation, internal reconstruction. 3 questions, full-fledged 16 marks you get, you are through. 16 into 3, 48. You are through. Accounting standards. Out of 20, any worst case possibility, you should get 10. 48 plus 10, 58. After that, if you have left any questions also, no problem. 58 is a very good marks. Yes, with your brilliant handwriting, it might touch exemption 60. There should not be a problem to get 60 in accounting. Until and unless the question paper is really screwing. Yes, it is quite possible. I have seen such question papers. Trust me, when I wrote ICWA Inter, I was like, God, this is not the paper for ICWA. This is not the paper for ICWA because I was struggling to pass in accounts. Do you understand that? I was literally struggling to pass in accounts. I am calculating, it is coming to 38, 39. The moment we see the question paper, we will come to know the field. So, what and all I had to do, pass, I got 47 in ICWA. It's insulting, but it's like, it was a negative thing, but still I had to protect. Somebody comes to stab you, you should protect yourself. Stabbing another person is ideal, but somebody comes to hit you, you should protect yourself. In that protection, at least I walked through, it would have been such an insult to fail in accounts, that too in ICW after qualifying, very difficult to accept the reality. So my point is, yes, you can get off days like that. It cannot be said that all 7 papers will be like that. But whatever it is, be prepared. How I attacked that is, where I got 47, even if I know 20% of the answer, I have answered it. I did not leave anything. Yes, I do not know the entire sum. I am sure that sum is going to go wrong, because the field itself, I will come to know that I am going wrong. When we are writing an answer, somewhere we miss out, we'll start getting that repercussions that it is not going in a proper direction. Right? Maybe that will come to you out of lot of experience. Maybe it's already come to you. Good if it has come, but don't panic. This chapter is a savior for everyone, I'm telling. If you do well in this chapter, you will easily, the paper will sail through across. And remember, always, according to me, the first paper is the best paper. How you write the first paper, the emotions get carried on to the next paper. Account CA, for example, if you take first paper is accounting. You do well in accounting, the confidence level oozes and you push on to the next. But at the same time, ulta logic also is possible. First paper you get hit, then definitely it will carry over to the second paper. For that, you should be street smart. Only one suggestion to you, paper you have written and given it to the invigilator or evaluator, whoever it is out of your control. Nothing more can be done. You will not be given another opportunity for the next 6 months. So forget it. You should have that balance. When you have done paper wrongly, you should have that balance. When you have done paper brilliantly, even then have the balance. Don't become overconfident. This sum is definitely going to push you to overconfidence zone, because 16 on 16 you can get. There is no way that you can get lesser than that also. 16 on 16, assuming this is the first sum. What a boost it will be, First sum, 16 on 16, what a start it was, like a first ball sixer. But at the same time, first questions are always tricky. It's like boxing, CA Institute, whoever has set the paper, he wants to come and first punch your nose should start bleeding. The moment you see blood, you are panicked. So, carefully handle it. What I suggest always to my students is, keep the first question last. 99.99% first question will be tricky. Trust me on this. There are people who have messed up because they'll start with one question. They are so confident that they are going good. Eventually they'll realize they have lost 1 hour for the first question. 1 hour they would have spent on the first question only for 16 marks. Then what happens to your mind is unimaginable, because immediately mind starts calculating, oh shit, 84 marks to be done in only 2 hours. Their panic mode will come. Whatever might be the case, my sincere and humble suggestion to you, first question, take it last. You would have got that flow, speed will be there. Attempt theory questions first, so that speed will come, and it will start paining. Have you all experienced that? From here till here it will pain. You guys are all privileged guys, man. ICW exam was morning, afternoon for me. First group, second group. First group, second group. Even today I suffer the hand pain, but for a good cause. Really for a good cause, go for the kill. You have to work out to know the hand pain. Work out 8 hours a day, then you'll know what it is. Don't do auditing in textbooks. He's done it correctly. This step is correctly done. Super. Hey, what author, pa? Book is superb. Every step beautifully is written. Arey Baba, his job is that he's done it. Are you doing your job? What is your job? Practice. If you practice, you get the speed. If you practice, you will get that breakthroughs. Your mind will push for the next step. Right? These are simple basics. Don't miss out on those things. Next. Again, I have just discussed it generally. In specific, we will discuss when we get on to sums. Treatment of outstanding expenses, prepaid expenses, advance incomes, outstanding incomes. In balance sheet, it's simple. No Schedule 3 application. Fixed assets, current liabilities, loans, capital fund. If they ask you to put it in vertical format, sources of funds under that capital fund, loans, out, over, balance sheet over on the liability side. Asset side, application of funds, fixed assets, current assets less current liabilities, balance sheet, total. Are we clear on this? So we need to know the art of shifting. You can present it in any which ways you want if they are not specifically asked. For that matter, if you want to produce it in schedule 3, most welcome, but time management, it's up to you. Because schedule 3 requires note number, all those things. Here, no, direct you can put. Within bracket, internally you can work out and show. Because there is no accounting standard telling that a receipts and payments account should come like this. There is no provisions of law to tell a receipts and payments account should be presented like this. In many cases, we feel the moment something comes on our left hand side, if it is a T format, something comes on the left hand side, it is expenses. No, I present in our office even today, signed balance sheets, receipts comes on the left hand side, payments comes on the right hand side. There is no provisions in law to tell this has to come like this. As long as your basic application about treatment of expenses, treatment of receipts and payments, treatment of income and expenditure is taken care through. But balance sheet, yes, asset should come on the asset side, liability should come on the liability side. Are we clear on this? Yes. So we will take up few questions. Now, what I would like to do is, I have already a handout which has 2 questions. I would dictate one question. I want a question to be dealt for this, reverse working. So for that I will dictate a question and we will take all the 3 questions tomorrow, right? Theory okay?